So the emerald ash borer is a small insect that was brought here through, they think, wood packaging, which is probably the route. A number of years ago, it moved to Ontario and has slowly kind of made its way across Ontario. And one of the biggest ways that it's been moving is through firewood movement, and so that's how it came to be in the city of Kawartha Lakes. One of the first hotspots was at Balsam Lake Provincial Park, and since has moved right on through the city. So here in Lindsay, it would be tough to find an ash tree that isn't impacted or infested with emerald ash borer. Some are less so because of where they're located, so they're a little bit farther out or more of a distance from an area of highly populated ash. So trees that grow in clusters or that were planted in clusters tend to be more infested. So Memorial Park, where the train is located, had a high number of ash trees, and so all of the ash trees there are in decline, and most of them to this date have been removed. And so you can see, and this tree behind me, this is a heavily infested ash tree, and we know that because of the bark has been removed, and and you can see a little cavity here. That's where a woodpecker has actually started to remove the bark to get to feed on the larvae, and which feed beneath the bark. And so that's one of the other difficult things about emerald ash borer, is that they're difficult to see. You don't often see them flying, and that would be the adult form, the beetles. But the only time you know when an ash is infested is because the tree starts to decline or die back. So it loses a lot of its leaves in the summertime or flushes its leaves in the spring, and a lot of the tree remains dead or just bark. So this is the larva of the emerald ash borer. So this is the stage of the insect that actually feeds beneath the bark. And what's interesting is you can see how nice and flat it is. You'd have to be flat to feed between the bark and the wood of a tree. And so thousands of these, and in some large trees, hundreds of thousands would feed beneath the bark, and the number of the insects feeding is what eventually kills the tree. And this pretty little, I'll put the sun on them so you can see this pretty little insect here, that's the adult beetle. So they are very, very small. You don't often see them. If you're lucky, you'll see them flying in June, which is when most of the beetles will emerge up here, mate, and begin to lay their eggs. And you can see them flying all the way until the end of August, but mostly in June is when the population really spikes. And so if you're looking at an ash tree to determine whether it has emerald ash borer, and if it doesn't look like the one we looked at behind me, you'll notice that you'll see tiny D-shaped exit holes, tiny D-shaped holes in the bark, and that's where the adult beetle chewed its way out from beneath the bark to mate. Unless the tree has been injected with a pesticide or an insecticide that essentially kills the insect, the tree will die. And basically what happens is the insect, the larva, looks like a little grub or worm. It feeds between the bark and the wood of the tree, and that is the area where all of your nutrients and your water is transported for the entire tree. So as it feeds through that tissue, and it feeds in tiny S-shaped galleries, as it feeds through that tissue, it blocks off those transportation or those highways where the water and the sugars produced through photosynthesis move, and so essentially girdles the tree and kills the tree.
Wow. So, but there is something that homeowners can do to protect their trees,
right? Right. At this point in City of Kawartha Lakes, I would say it's late. Unless they have an inspection and they have a certified arborist come out to inspect the tree to determine whether the tree is too far gone. There may be some that still aren't infested if they are outliers and not close to a populated area that may be worth treating, but the tree really has to be in fairly good shape. Even if it has a small level infestation, it has to be in fairly good shape in order for that insecticide to work, and then it needs to be done on a regular basis after the first, so every 2 years after the first injection, to keep kind of the resiliency of the tree in check.
So pretty much every single ash tree within the city has been infested. So that's really going to drastically change the look of some of our communities.
The urban forest. Yes, it sure will. It sure will. And so most municipalities have gone with the removal option. It's definitely the most cost effective, and in my opinion, it's pretty smart. As long as you commit to a replanting plan and a diversified urban forest, so planting different species. It happened with our elm trees where we planted a lot of elm and then Dutch elm came through, and so we replaced a lot of those with ash, and now emerald ash borer is here. So I know that the city has committed more money to replanting since emerald ash borer has moved into town. So that's a positive for sure.
But you say the oak tree might be next.
Yeah, unfortunately, oak wilt is also just on the border of Windsor in Detroit. So right now, I know the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry and the Canadian Canadian Food Inspection Agency, they are actually teaming up to monitor the areas that are right adjacent to the state's